god! It's time for another video!
Well, it's that time again. It's time for another ranking video, and today we're going to be talking some more Ninja Gaiden. Now, a while back I ranked every 2D Ninja Gaiden game, but with the release of Ninja Gaiden 4, you know it's time to rank every 3D Ninja Gaiden. At this point, Ninja Gaiden is probably more well known for its 3D games than its 2D games. There were plenty of awesome 2D games, but the series really just blew up in popularity once it made the transition to 3D, and it's easily one of the best 2D to 3D transitions that any video game series has seen. The series really just got elevated to the next level once it hit 3D, where you actually feel like a badass ninja that can stop anything in its tracks. And just like the older titles, these games were also brutally difficult, but they're also some of the most well-received hack and slash character action games of them all. These games are absolutely beloved, and that's why today I'm going to be ranking all of the 3D Ninja Gaiden games from worst to best. Y'all already know the drill. I'm going to be giving each one of these games a review, shining a spotlight for every single one. This isn't going to be just a basic little ranking. No, each game is getting a review, some time to shine, where I'll be sharing my thoughts, feelings, memories, etc. As always, I'm a bit of a yapper, so we're gonna be here a while. With that in mind, start the car up, start going to bed, get the popcorn, get the Wendy's spicy nuggets, start grinding away at the 9 to 5, however you're gonna watch or listen to this video. I got plenty of things to say about these games, since a few of them are some of my favorite games of all time. And I'll even be covering the latest Ninja Gaiden, Ninja Gaiden 4, recently releasing. Major shout out to Xbox for hooking me up with a review code. I really do appreciate it. Xbox sent me the code. This isn't a sponsorship or anything of the sort though. It was simply just a review code, and I will try my best to not let that affect my judgment. The last thing that I want to bring up is that several of these games have actually been re-released numerous times. For instance, Ninja Gaiden 2 has 3 different versions now. I'm going to just be combining all of these versions into one entry, otherwise we would be here all day. And these versions, for the most part, are similar enough to the point where it just doesn't really make a lot of sense to give them their own separate entries. And if that bothers you, well, I'm sorry. But anyway, enough dilly-dallying around, let's get to the list. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. I got the Patreon and memberships. All support is truly, truly greatly appreciated. Seriously, thank you all so very much. We also got the Discord where we're all chatting, no drama. Either way, let's get to the list. So, of the 3D Ninja Gaiden games, what is the weakest? So here we got Yaiba Ninja Gaiden Z, releasing initially in 2014. This might be the strangest game in the entire Ninja Gaiden series. And really, it's more of a spin-off than anything else, but I also think that it's easily the weakest 3D Ninja Gaiden game. Now, I remember back when this game came out, I was actually pretty excited for it. I pre-ordered it and everything, and then I got it at release and went, huh, this isn't really all that great. So the first thing you're probably wondering, especially if you're unfamiliar with this game, is what the heck is a Yaiba? Well, Yaiba is the main character of this game. No, you do not play as Ryu Hayabusa. You play as this new character, a powerful ninja known as Yaiba Kamikaze, and he's just kind of a psychopath. And at one point he fights Ryu Hayabusa, who promptly whips his ass, mocks him, and even kills him. However, Yaiba actually is brought back to life by this weird organization known as Forge Industries, and he makes it his mission to go after Ryu. There's a bunch of other things going on in the background, but even if I'm not huge on this game, I'm still not going to spoil the story. The story in this game, yeah, I'll just be blunt, it's bad. Look, Ninja Gaiden has never had great stories, and oftentimes the stories just kind of devolve into nonsense, but this really takes things to another level. Why would I want to fight Ryu Hayabusa? Why would I want to go up against the series protagonist? This Yaiba guy is so wildly unlikable. He's just a total shithead, and honestly gets what he deserves when Ryu murders him, but no, they bring him back and he's our main protagonist, and it's like, you want this guy to be the character we're rooting for? You want him to be the anti-hero? Or whatever they were going for here? No, Yaiba's not a good protagonist. This story is one of the worst that the series has ever seen, and that really is saying something, and I look back and I'm just like, what the fuck was anyone thinking here? But hey, the story's never been the focal point of Ninja Gaiden. It's always been all about the gameplay, and the gameplay of Yaiba is a mixed bag, if we're being nice. I'd say it's a mixed bag full of Fruit Loops staples and the occasional push pin. It is for the most part pain. Like the other Ninja Gaiden games, it is a 3D hack and slash, where you will indeed be hacking and slashing, but this combat feels nowhere near as good as any of the other 3D Ninja Gaiden games. Outside of the DS game, all of the other 3D Ninja Gaiden games have really tight, smooth, weighted controls that take a minute to master. There's some actual heft to them, there's some momentum, positioning matters, and most of all, those games actually feel good. This game does not. The combat feels very weightless, floaty, and all over the place. Your weapons don't have the same impact that they do in really any other Ninja Gaiden game. The enemies don't react accordingly. The gore is nowhere near as good as the previous games. It just doesn't have the same kind of flow or pacing to it that legit any of the other Ninja Gaiden games have. And you go, okay, it doesn't have to be exactly the same. It can be a little different. See, that's the thing. Not only is it different, but it's bad. It just doesn't feel good. It's not satisfying. It doesn't come together in a conclusive way. The combat feels incredibly sloppy. It kind of just feels thrown together with duct tape. It's incredibly slippery. It's been hanging out with P. Diddy way too much. None of the weapons really feel good at all. Not even the executions feel good, which is just a sin for a Ninja Gaiden game. And it doesn't matter that there's, quote, depth, since there actually is a fair amount of combos, because all of it just kind of feels like shit. And when it comes to the enemy roster and their strategies, there's pretty much nothing here. For the most part, you're fighting literally mindless zombies, where they either go down faster than a tweaker at Jack in the Box and the Munchie Meal, or they're the most spongy enemies imaginable, putting SpongeBob to shame, and it just feels like it takes forever to defeat. The combat is not good, straight up. There's these elements that are thrown in there like fire, electricity, poison, and this doesn't really add anything or enhance the combat whatsoever. And from time to time you'll even get these big fuck you weapons, but these don't feel anywhere near as powerful as they should. And of course there's plenty of wonderful quick time events. I just don't really have anything nice to say about the combat. The entire game also features fixed camera angles, and despite them being fixed, they're usually terrible, and you'll find yourself getting hit from attacks off screen where you had no idea that the attack was even coming, and yeah, you just get hit, and that's totally unfair. Speaking of unfair, this game can feel pretty unfair at times. It's difficult. It's definitely got that Ninja Gaiden difficulty to it, but it feels more cheap and annoying than anything else. The boss fights are so spongy and annoying in this game. They just take way too long to defeat. Yeah, the combat sucks, and the combat is like 90-95% of this game, so the game by default kind of sucks. When it comes to the presentation, it's interesting. That's certainly what it is. The game goes for a cel-shaded art style that doesn't look terrible, but man, is this game ugly. It just has such an ugly aesthetic and vibe to it, which is clearly what they were going for, and part of me kind of likes that. I like that the game is going for something different, but why did it have to be so fucking ugly? Like, come on now. At least the music is good, like really good. It was done by Grant Kirkhope of Banjo-Kazooie, Donkey Kong 64 fame, and oh yeah, he hits here. It's got a great soundtrack that I still listen to this day. And there were times that I was playing this where I went, you know, I think I'd rather dive into oncoming traffic than continue with this. It's easily the best aspect of this game. Really, it's the only good aspect. The gameplay sucks, the story sucks, it's ugly as sin. And so with that in mind and this rant finishing up, I think it's pretty obvious how I feel about it. I absolutely do not recommend it. And so here we have Ninja Gaiden Dragon Sword releasing for the DS in 2008. This is one of the stranger Ninja Gaiden titles and probably the most gimmicky of them all. And yes, it very much is a 3D game. So when it comes to this game's story, it's set in between Ninja Gaiden Black and Ninja Gaiden 2. And it sees Ryu Hayabusa rebuilding the Hayabusa village when one of the main characters / villagers, Mamaji, is kidnapped by the Black Spider Ninja clan, and so it's up to Ryu to go find her and uncover the secrets behind these mysterious dragon stones. The story for the most part is relatively basic. It's not as advanced or complex as the main 3D Ninja Gaiden titles, and that's fine with me. You know, it gets the job done and it's not unbelievably shockingly stupid, and so yeah, that's pretty decent for Ninja Gaiden. Now, when it comes to actually playing this game, it's pretty different from legit any of the other Ninja Gaiden games. So, the game was released exclusively for the DS, and you would actually hold it sideways like a book. And a few other games did this on DS as well. If you remember, Brain Age or Hotel Dusk Room 215, and even Guitar Hero on DS did this. But this concept was rarely seen on the DS. I do think this game, though, is probably the best execution of it outside of Brain Age, and it actually works despite how unconventional it is. Speaking of unconventional, we have the game's control method. You already know with this being a DS title that you're going to be tapping on that screen, and yeah, pretty much everything is done by tapping on the screen. It's actually pretty similar to Zelda Phantom Hourglass, where you either have to tap or hold or draw on the screen in order to do attacks and techniques. The game really uses a combination of buttons and drawing or tapping on the screen in order to do basically anything in this game, and while it sounds really cumbersome and gimmicky, I gotta say that it still surprisingly works decently well. Yeah, it is really gimmicky and it's actually better on a real DS versus an emulator, but this isn't the worst control scheme I've ever seen on the DS, far from it, and while it was starting to give me carpal tunnel and giving me the ouchie ouchies, it is functional. It actually does come together to create some half decent gameplay here. The actual moment to moment gameplay outside of tapping all over the screen is really just combat. You're moving in pretty linear fashion through these surprisingly pre-rendered environments, pretty much just annihilating everything in your path. There isn't really any exploration or puzzles here, it's just combat encounter to combat encounter. And while it does take a minute to get used to the controls and how the combat feels, it's again more well put together than you might expect. Like, this actually has some cool moments and set pieces to it. It's not all that bad. They really tried with this. They wanted a full Ninja Gaiden game on handheld, and for the most part I think they succeeded. It's certainly not perfect, and it's not one of the very best Ninja Gaiden games. I mean, the controls are still gimmicky at the end of the day. They still have quite a steep learning curve, and you do kind of get carpal tunnel from playing it. The camera can be a bit finicky, and the environments can look a bit funky, especially with the 3D models. But thankfully, it doesn't go on too long. It's one of the shorter Ninja Gaiden titles, and probably the shortest 3D one. The music ain't even half bad either. The game has genuinely aged way better than I thought it would. I expected to come back to this and just be like, what is this gimmicky mess of a game? Even Yaiba's better, but no, I'd rather play this than Yaiba. Playing through this game sounds a lot more appealing than the electric chair, which is not something I can say about Yaiba. Regardless of all that, do I recommend the game? Yes and no. If you're somebody that loves the Ninja Gaiden series, then it might be worth checking out, but you also kind of have to go out of your way to play it nowadays. This is one of those games where I would say it's actually way better on original hardware than an emulator, which makes it even less accessible, but hey, if you have a DS and you're looking for a game that's actually pretty decent, this might be one worth checking out. So here we got Ninja Gaiden 3, which originally released in 2012, and for this list I'll be talking specifically about the Razor's Edge version, which I believe to be the definitive way to play through Ninja Gaiden 3. I actually got the original game when it came out and thought it was pretty decent, but then many years later I played through the Razor's Edge version on the Master Collection and went, yeah, it's not even close. Razor's Edge is way better than the original game, so that's what I'm sticking with here. Now, over the years, Ninja Gaiden 3 has been a bit overhated in my opinion. While it absolutely does have flaws and it is the weakest of the trilogy, I still think this game is pretty entertaining and you can have a fair amount of fun with it. Despite saying that, when it comes to this game's story, yeah, I don't really have any love for this. The story starts with Ryu being called into London to take on some mysterious terrorist group who then infects his right arm with a bunch of voodoo nonsense, and his arm becomes all ugly, bloody, and generally just unpleasant to look at, and so it's up to Ryu to figure out how to get rid of this curse and take out this new terrorist organization. Out of all the Ninja Gaiden games, this one has one of the worst plots. It's not the worst, I don't think anything's gonna sink lower than Yaiba, but man is it dumb as shit. The writing, characters, storyline, plot progression, dialogue, it just doesn't really come together. It's not too interesting, it's bland, it's generic, it's uninspired, it drags on, and by the end of it, I just felt really indifferent, which is like the worst feeling I can have for a plot. I also think that it's honestly a little too prevalent in the game. There are several sequences where you just walk forward slowly listening to dialogue, and obviously this is all over games nowadays. But does this really belong in an action-packed Ninja Gaiden title? Yeah, I don't think so. The story and everything to do with it, I wasn't really big on it, and Razor's Edge adds a little bit more story, and yeah, I just couldn't really care here. So when it comes to the gameplay, it isn't all that different from Ninja Gaiden 2. It still sees you slicing and dicing your way through pretty much everything in sight. And the game, at least the Razor's Edge version, still has some of the most visceral combat you'll find in a game from this era. While it isn't unbelievably over the top when it comes to its violence, like say the second game, it's still a pretty gory affair. And you're regularly chopping dudes up like they're sushi or lines of cocaine. Don't ask me how I know that. When it comes to how Ryu himself and the combat feels, I think it actually feels pretty good. It's still weighted, there's a bit of wind up, and positioning really does matter here. It's easy to pick up and play, but there is actually a little bit of depth here. Unfortunately, just to be straight up here, it does feel a bit streamlined from the previous 2 games, and there's less weapons than the previous 2 games as well. This is like the most common complaint about Ninja Gaiden 3, is that it feels a bit overly simplified, and yeah, there's absolutely some merit to that. It's one of those cases where it's all style, no substance. There just isn't as much depth or complexity to this title, especially when you compare it to the 2 prior games, and one of the reasons that there's not as much depth is the lacking enemy roster. The enemy roster just isn't very good in this game. Like 80-85% of the roster is just regular dudes. Really, outside of the bosses, you're just fighting regular dudes most of the time. And yeah, it's fun to chop the shit out of them, where you get to chop them up like they're your vegetables for a salad or something, but it does start to get old, especially by the end of it. Where's all the cool demons and creatures and monsters? Where's the enemy variety? I've looked all over and I just can't find it. It's either dudes with swords, dudes with guns, or annoying motherfucker with rocket launcher in the corner. This game loves to do that and I always hate it. It seems like all the creatures and cool monsters are saved for the boss fights. And the boss fights, yeah, there are some decent ones here. I'm not going to act like they're all terrible. Fighting the dinosaur was pretty entertaining, but it feels like for every good boss fight, there's a stinker in there, like where you fight this annoying helicopter. And since I'm already bitching and complaining, let's whine some more. This game is littered with quick time events, and I hate like all of these. These are so annoying, like when you're climbing the wall, and they just don't add anything. It feels like they're sprinkled in there for the sake of being in there. Some enemies just feel way too spongy in this game, especially a lot of the bosses. Really, all of the bosses I don't like are super spongy, and the final boss is just an abomination. It's shockingly bad, and maybe the low point for this entire game. It really is that bad. I've already brought up this game's depth, or really lack of depth, but I do want to say that at times this game can get pretty mindless. And there are plenty of times where it really feels like you can just turn your brain off and hack away at everything you see. You won't need any strategy. Outside of rocket launcher motherfuckers, you don't really have to prioritize any enemies over other ones, and most of them won't really give you a run for their money. And while I like playing games where I can turn my brain off from time to time, I also got to remind you, this is a Ninja Gaiden game, you know, like one of the hardest series of video games ever. So for the game to generally not demand the utmost of you is kind of a cardinal sin. This game in general isn't very challenging, and I think I died the least in it of any of the mainline Ninja Gaiden titles. I even died more in Yaiba. And so yeah, if you couldn't tell, this game is a little bit of a mixed bag. While it can be some mindless fun, and it does absolutely have some great and entertaining moments to it, it is also lacking a bit in the depth, complexity, variety, difficulty, and story. However, if you're looking for just a mindless hack and slash you can get a few hours of fun out of, this might be worth checking out, especially if you thought the other games were just too difficult. This one is a lot simpler and digestible. I'm not going to act like I didn't have any fun with this game. That's just simply not true. There were plenty of times where I enjoyed myself. It's just when compared to the other mainline Ninja Gaiden titles, this game's just okay. And then here we have Ninja Gaiden 4 releasing here in 2025. Again, do want to give a shout out for Microsoft for hooking me up with a review code on this one. It is very much appreciated. Now, I didn't think we'd really ever get another Ninja Gaiden in the style of the prior 3D ones. I thought if we were going to get another Ninja Gaiden, it would probably be in the style of Neo or a Souls-like, but no, this is a full-on character action game that's a really great throwback to how hack and slash games used to be. Now, when it comes to the story, it takes place quite a bit after Ninja Gaiden 3, and it actually doesn't primarily star Ryu Hayabusa. Instead, it mostly focuses on Yakumo, this new protagonist and young ninja of the Raven clan, and the game starts with him being sent on a mission to assassinate some priestess of some dark dragon that is apparently plunging the world into darkness, but things obviously get quite a bit more complicated after that. The story, like the prior 3D Ninja Gaiden titles, is just kinda all over the place, and it's probably the weakest element of the entire game. It's just kinda there, and by the end of it, I was really having a hard time actually caring about what was happening. Maybe it's just a me thing, but I felt rather indifferent to not only Yakumo, but the story in general. Like, the setting is cool. It's cool that it takes place after the third Ninja Gaiden. It's cool that they brought the antagonist from the DS game back. That's some fun fan service, but I found the story to just be kind of bland and even generic at times. And I just didn't find Yakumo to be the most interesting, compelling compelling or likable protagonist at times. Ryu was never all that emotive, expressive, and he didn't have much of a personality because he's a silent but deadly ninja. Yakumo, they try to give him a little bit more personality, but it just kind of fell flat for me. This whole story really just kind of felt flat for me, but you know, that's kind of in line with Ninja Gaiden. I'm not going to sit here and act like the other 3D titles had amazing stories with superb writing, characters, dialogue, etc. This is pretty in line for this series as a whole. I was just hoping this game would maybe buck the trend and have something truly great, but alas. You're here for the gameplay anyway, so let's just talk about the gameplay. So even though the advertisements and the trailers show a lot of Ryu, I'll just be blunt, like 80% of the game sees you playing as Yakumo. You only play as Ryu at the very end of the game, and after you beat the game, you can play through the entire game as him, which is cool, but I was hoping maybe it was going to be a bit more 50-50. At the very least though, Yakumo does have a lot of abilities and tools at his disposal. He's not some lesser version of Ryu, he can kick a lot of ass too. So when it comes to the core moment-to-moment gameplay of Ninja Gaiden 4, it's most similar actually to Ninja Gaiden 2. It's just a straight up character action game. It is not a Souls-like, there is no souls or leveling up or circle strafing or any RPG elements really here at all. It is a straight character action game that we just don't see enough of in the modern gaming landscape, and it absolutely kicks ass. I'll just immediately say that this game feels great. While positioning doesn't matter as much and it doesn't feel as weighted and it is a bit faster than the other Ninja Gaiden titles, it still feels incredible. They absolutely nailed the feel and control here. Something else that I think they nailed is the combat. The combat is great in this game. There's a few different weapons for Yakumo and they all feel incredibly different from each other. Like they have completely different playstyles, movesets, strengths, weaknesses, etc. And swapping between them is easy and seamless. I love just how different these weapons feel from each other, and some weapons are clearly better than others when it comes to certain enemies, which actually adds even more depth to the whole thing. While the combat isn't as deep as the fucking Atlantic Ocean, like say DMC5, it is nowhere near as shallow as a little puddle, and it actually has a lot more going on than even Ninja Gaiden 3 did. It might actually have the most advanced combat of the entire series, and the enemy roster is no slouch here either. There's actually a pretty good variety. There are plenty of human enemies that you will just get to maim and destroy, but there's tons of monsters and demons here. There's plenty of returning enemies, including those annoying ass fish that latch onto you, but there's also a lot of new ones, and there's a good amount of bosses here, and the bosses are absolute spectacles. The bosses are a highlight for sure. What I'm trying to say is, when it comes to what really matters in a Ninja Gaiden title, you know, the combat, they absolutely nailed it. They did a great job. Not only does it feel like a small evolution on what prior games did, but it also plays and feels great in its own right, and honestly, everything else about the game could be absolutely terrible, but with combat this good, it would still be a pretty decent game. But there are a few other decent things to it. The level design, while being incredibly straightforward and linear, is still alright. It feels like a roller coaster at times, and they're putting you on a bunch of crazy set pieces, but honestly, that's what you want for an action game like this. And even though the game likes to reuse assets, environments, and set pieces from time to time, I still found it all to be rather enjoyable. And the platforming / interacting with the environment were nice distractions in between the combat. And there is actually a little bit of exploration. If you go off the beaten path, you're usually rewarded for it, and you're usually given some of the two games' currencies, allowing you to get a bunch of new techniques. I'm not going to act like the level design or structure and pacing absolutely blew me away, but hey, I think it was pretty solid, and it's very much in line with what this series has. Something else in line that I feel like I should bring up for Ninja Gaiden 4 is the difficulty. This is nowhere near as difficult as some of the older ones. I died a fair amount, but I wouldn't say the game is brutally difficult, it's just challenging. Something else that's in line is the presentation. While it's not an absolute stunning game, it's not the biggest looker, it still is good for the most part graphically. I still think the game looks more than nice enough, and the important thing is that it actually runs super well. It was super smooth, never had any issues on my computer, really rock steady, 60 FPS, and that's exactly what matters here. The game can look like ass, but as long as it runs well, that's really what matters. It's all to, you know, service the combat because the combat is so good. Music was actually pretty decent here as well. So overall, Ninja Gaiden 4 really is a return to form for the series. It's what the series has needed after such a long time, and while I don't think it's the very best of the Ninja Gaidens and it struggles in a few areas, I have no problem saying Ninja Gaiden is totally back. This game is totally worth checking out if you liked any of the old games or if you enjoy character action games. At $70, that is pretty steep, I'm not gonna lie. The game's around 10 to 11 hours, and I wouldn't say that it's exactly the most replayable. I just feel like I'm not going to be coming back to this one like I have with Ninja Gaiden 2, Black, etc. So maybe check this one out on Game Pass if you still have it, or wait for a pretty hefty discount. These kinds of games usually go pretty cheap pretty fast. Either way, I'm really happy that Ninja Gaiden's back, and I'm sure plenty of y'all are wondering, well, why isn't this game higher than if it's so good? Well, the truth is I just like the other games more. But believe me, it's not by much. Speaking of. And so here we have Ninja Gaiden 2, originally releasing for the 360 in 2008, but it was eventually re-released as Ninja Gaiden Sigma 2, that's what's in the Master Collection, and it was most recently released as Ninja Gaiden 2 Black. So yeah, I'm just combining all of these versions, and the gameplay you see here is from Ninja Gaiden 2 Black. Now, Ninja Gaiden 2 is actually decently different from the original in a number of key aspects, but first, let's start with the plot. The game takes place after Ninja Gaiden Black, and it sees, surprise surprise, the Black Spider Ninja Clan rolling up and causing trouble, but make it double because there's a bunch of other crazy shit that happens in this game, and it's up to Ryu to just kinda stop it all. The story of Ninja Gaiden 2 goes pretty crazy in this game. Like, there's tons of wacky shit. There's cultists, demons, dragons, there's a bunch of crazy shit going on, and I'll be real, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I've never really been able to make heads or ass of Ninja Gaiden 2's story no matter how many times I've played through it. It's just kinda there. It doesn't get in the way, and it kinda feels like more of an excuse to put you into these really awesome situations than anything else. And you know what? That's totally fine with me. That's why I'm coming to a game like Ninja Gaiden 2. And I appreciate that it goes balls to the walls. It really matches the action of this game. This is one of the most balls to the walls action games you will ever play. Like, this game goes absolutely insano mode, more so than any other Ninja Gaiden game to date. If you thought God of War or Devil May Cry got pretty crazy, you haven't seen just how truly nutty Ninja Gaiden 2 will get. And I truly mean that in a positive way. The first thing I'll say about it is that the game feels great. Ryu controls incredibly well, the combat is smooth, tight, fluid, fast, visceral, gory, and most importantly, satisfying. You will absolutely shred through enemies in this game. You will annihilate them with your many techniques and weapons. When it comes to what Ryu can do in this game, it's more so than maybe any other Ninja Gaiden title. You get so many weapons in this game. Like, this game is just constantly giving you weapons almost every single level, and they all behave differently. They all have their own attributes, strengths, weaknesses, and movesets, and it's so much fun to just swap between all of these weapons and trying all of them out. Like, yeah, the sword is really great, but a lot of these also go crazy, especially when you start upgrading them and start getting new moves for all these weapons. Like, Ryu can do some absolutely loony, bonkers shit in this game, especially when you start charging up moves and Ryu starts gaining momentum. Like, you just go fucking nuts. You'll chop the shit out of these things. You will grind these fuckers into dust, and it is so much fun. It is always such a great time to just absolutely eviscerate enemies in this game. It doesn't really matter which version of the game you're playing, you will eviscerate them. While the Sigma version didn't have as much gore as the original, Black actually does bring a lot of it back, and it's still incredibly gory and at times a little hard to watch, but man is it satisfying, especially when you just wipe out fools left and right. And there's actually a bit of depth and strategy here. There's actually, you know, some complexity. You can't just turn your mind off for this one. Okay, maybe if you're really good at the game, you can. But for most people, that's not going to be the case, thanks to just the sheer amount of moves you can do, all the different weapons, the many different enemy types. There's actually a lot of variety here, and the game is decently challenging still. It isn't stupid fucking difficult where I want to rip the new hair off my head in anger, but this isn't a walk in the park, not by any means, except maybe these bosses. Some of them you can absolutely annihilate in like seconds, but most of them are going to give you a run for your money. But at the end of the day, you know what Ninja Gaiden 2 does? It makes you feel fucking powerful. You feel unstoppable in this game. You actually do feel like a badass ninja, where you can just chop through everything that moves, and it's genuinely so much fun. I've actually played through every version of this game at this point, the 360 version, the Sigma version, and now the Black version, and yeah, it's always just so much fun. And I feel like few hack and slash games can touch the intensity of Ninja Gaiden 2. Is it a bit over the top? Does it go too balls to the walls, dick in the electric socket? Yeah, absolutely, and I'm sure there are plenty of people that don't really care for how crazy this game gets or liked the more methodical, slower approach of Black, but I like both of them. I think both combat styles are great, and I think both of them are really fun. And I don't think that anybody can deny that this game has some of the flashiest combat of any hack and slash game ever. I will say though, outside of the combat, things are pretty lacking here. The complex, structured level design of Black, where it was a little non-linear and there was some exploration, yeah, that's just completely gone. Now it's just hallways where you're just always moving forward. It's incredibly streamlined, simple, basic, and yeah, there's barely any design to the level design. It feels like these are more so just transition periods to get to the next big fight rather than being an integral part of the game like Black. But hey, it's way better than whatever Yaiba and 3 had, and most people probably didn't come to this looking for decent level design. They came here looking for fast-paced, intense combat, and you certainly get that in spades. And depending on which version you're playing, the presentation might be good or really good. I always thought this was a good-looking game, but this new Black version actually looks pretty great. Yeah, it is an Unreal and can look a little generic at times, but the lighting is really well done. The environments look nice. Yeah, everything actually looks pretty nice here. And if you're going to play any version of Ninja Gaiden 2 at this point, well, you can't really go wrong with any version, but I'd probably recommend the Black version above them all. It's the most accessible, and I do think it is a bit better than Sigma 2. All in all, if you're somebody that likes action games or hack and slash games or good character action games and you haven't tried this, I don't know what you're waiting for. Drop everything, go try this one. It doesn't get much crazier than this. And while I know this game isn't everybody's cup of tea, it's one of my favorite action games of all time, and it's almost my favorite Ninja Gaiden. And then here we have it, the fan favorite, the GOAT, the original 3D Ninja Gaiden. Whether it's the Black version, the Sigma version, doesn't really matter too much. This game has always been just an absolute masterpiece. I'm sure there are plenty of people that prefer 2 and maybe even 4 now, but the original Ninja Gaiden has always been the one that has hit the hardest for me. Even back when this game came out, they knew it was just a certified masterpiece. When it comes to this game's story, it's actually pretty shrimple, especially when compared to some of the other Ninja Gaiden titles, and it probably is the best story in the entire series. Taking place in modern day, it sees you playing as Ryu Hayabusa, who's this master ninja in his quest to recover a stolen sword and avenge the slaughtering of his clan. It's a pretty similar story to the NES titles, but it feels beefed up in the best possible way. It actually makes sense, it's easy to follow, it's slightly compelling, and I feel like low-key it's the only 3D Ninja Gaiden story I've ever really cared about. Everything else was either just kind of there or I felt indifference, but as always, you're not really playing this game or this series for the story, its characters, writing, etc. You're playing for some kick-ass gameplay, and this game absolutely excels in that. When it comes to the combat, I really think it's like the best of the entire series still. It is pretty different from the direction that the series would end up taking. It's not this balls to the walls insanity that the second game and on would have. It's actually a lot more rooted in realism. I say that as you're a fucking ninja fighting demons, but it's a lot slower, it's more methodical. You aren't doing these 300-400 plus combos. The movement is really important, positioning is super important, where you are in the environment's important, what kind of enemy you're facing is important, the weapon of course really changes things up. There's a lot of depth here, deceptively so. And while I've always enjoyed the balls to the walls shit, I love my Ninja Gaiden 2 and now 4, I do actually like this approach more. It is a little bit more satisfying, at least in my opinion. It does a really good job of ramping up not only the difficulty but the action and just how crazy things start to get, and you also don't get like desensitized to just how much crazy shit is going on screen. And so when you start to do those really impressive techniques or combos, it has a lot more impact, it feels a lot more meaningful, and it makes it, at least in my opinion, a little bit more enjoyable. I've seen plenty of people say the opposite, saying that they prefer the crazy approach of the other ones. This one's too slow, basic, simplistic, whatever you want to call it. I disagree. I think we can agree though at the end of the day that the combat is really solid and it's actually aged incredibly well, and that it's going to take a minute to get used to the movement. Ryu is a lot heavier in this game than any of the other 3D titles, and if you play this game after playing 2 and on, it might feel a bit jarring at first, but I think you'll really come to enjoy it. I certainly did. I also really love the enemy roster in this game. It has tons of different enemies and you actually need different approaches for pretty much all of them. And I, again, like how the game continues to ramp things up slowly. When you start the game, you're just fighting other humans, other ninjas, but eventually you're fighting demons, dragons, and all sorts of crazy shit. And at first you won't be fighting more than 1 or 2, maybe 3 enemies at once. And then by the end of the game, yeah, they're just throwing tons upon tons of enemies at you and you just gotta hack and slash your way through everything. But they really ramp up to it. and naturally the difficulty ramps up as well. I will say, out of all the Ninja Gaiden titles, this really might be like the most challenging one of them all. This game is no joke. It is incredibly difficult. You can watch your life bar just get eviscerated in seconds. Enemies can be incredibly punishing, and the bosses are some of the toughest bosses of any hack and slash game. I quite enjoy the bosses of this game, but I'll be the first to admit some of them haven't aged all that well, and a lot of them are really gonna whip your ass. The game loves to kick your shit in, but it also loves it when you kick it back, when you start getting hella good, when you become the master ninja and you start whipping the game's ass, and it becomes immensely satisfying. Overcoming the difficulty feels so good in this game. When you've really mastered the movement and controls and you're firing off on all cylinders, it just feels incredible. None of the other Ninja Gaiden titles have that aha moment or feeling that this game had. Granted, they don't really go for it either. They go for something completely different, but I just really love the approach of the original 3D Ninja Gaiden. Something else that I really love about this game is the level design. It's not like the other ones whatsoever. The other ones are all straightforward linear affairs, not this original one. It's actually very non-linear. You get to explore around. It's very similar to, say, DMC 1 or 3 when it comes to the level design, and I actually found it to be a whole lot of fun. I enjoyed exploring these areas, I enjoyed finding all the nooks and crannies and secrets, and I enjoyed fighting enemies in these locations as well. I think the level design is arguably the best of the entire series. It has the most design behind it. It's not just a bunch of straight corridors, it actually has a lot going on here, and I think it's great even nowadays. A few areas certainly haven't aged all that well, and at times the game can feel a little cheap, but on balance, I think it's pretty good. I think the presentation is also still really good. It was a great looking game for the time, and I think it looks nice even nowadays with solid lighting, environments, character models, etc. Music is pretty good as well. This game really just kicks ass, and there's a reason it's still one of the best action games ever made. Does it have some flaws? Oh, absolutely. Like I mentioned, the game has some moments that haven't aged well. When you play as any of the other characters besides Ryu, which are funny enough exclusive to the Sigma version, it's not great. They don't feel or handle or control as well as Ryu, but I mean, they're pretty short segments, so it's really not the end of the world. The difficulty can be absolutely brutal at times too, where you're just like, holy shit, this game is hard as fuck, and it definitely reminds me of the NES titles. I would say that this game is probably the closest the 3D games ever got to the 2D games, where it feels like it really was a 2D to 3D transition, where all of the great stuff from the NES titles are here in this 3D title, as opposed to the later games which go and do their own thing, which again is totally fine. I love those games as well. It's just something I noticed. I love Ninja Gaiden Black. It's one of my absolute favorite hack and slash titles, and I think that everybody should check it out. Even if you're somebody who doesn't traditionally like these types of games, I think you're still going to enjoy it. I have no problem giving it my highest recommendation. It's an absolute masterpiece and worth your time. But that's it for today's video. We talked some 3D Ninja Gaiden. What's your favorite? I'd love to know down below. I kind of rambled for quite a bit here, but I love these games. Genuinely, I love just about all of these games, so I had fun rambling. With that in mind, I'm going to go to sleep. So, sleep is the code word. See you all later. Stay safe. Bye-bye.